Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. John Keir, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
Season 4, Episode 13. As we are recording, it is late on a Tuesday night. We are less than 2 days away from the NFL draft, so 48 hours from now, Austin, we should know the Steelers' first pick in the NFL draft. And we have one last position to look at for you guys, and it is, of course, inside linebacker, as it was at this time last year. The most important position that we believe the Steelers need to address, and I think it should go without saying, but I think the Steelers erred in not picking one last year, and they acknowledged their mistake in this offseason.
Yeah, I think they did. I think they realized that they know what they need to do this year.
And it seems like Kevin Colbert is on a mission to find one of these guys. So there were a bunch of guys brought in, a ton of guys that were looked at pro days and visits. So we have 12 different inside linebackers that we're looking at. So I guess first, let's talk a little bit quickly about what the Steelers have right now. They lost L.J. Fort in free agency, an unfortunate departure since he was such a valuable special teams player and a good sub-package player. So what are they losing in him, and is there anyone that can really replace him on the roster right now? And we'll kind of go through the makeup of that position group in a moment. But let's first talk about Fort a bit.
Well, yeah, starting with Fort, I feel like Fort being lost really hurts the coverage units. I felt like L.J. Fort was a better coverage linebacker, which I felt like the Steelers needed because Vince Williams and John Bostic are kind of slower and more better against the run rather than in coverage, while L.J. Fort was the opposite. He was better in coverage but kind of detrimental in the run game. So it kind of hurts to lose him. Plus, he was instrumental on special teams. He had blocked several kicks last year. I think it was 2 or 3. I forget how much, but he was such a big special teamer as well that he was so valuable. It stinks that he got away, but it is what it is. As for defense, replacing him, they have Mark Barron now. And Mark Barron is who I think is going to be the L.J. Fort. Maybe not. See, I don't think he's going to do the special teams part, but I think he's going to be the coverage part, where he's a better coverage linebacker over John Bostic. So, because he's got the speed, he's just undersized, which makes him bad against the run, just like L.J. Fort was. I saw from Rams fans they weren't very happy with his play last year because he's undersized, and so I think he fits perfectly in that role that L.J. Fort left. As for the other guys, I mean, you really got a bunch of the same kind of linebacker. I mean, Ryan Shazier is still technically on the roster, but we know he's not going to be playing this year. Vince Williams, John Bostic, and Tegray Scales, and Tyler Matakevich. I'm sorry, I glossed over him. They're all the same kind of linebacker. They're all kind of slower. They're all kind of better against the run. It's just, and then Matakevich is mostly a special teams guy. They really need to add a Ryan Shazier type again because all they got is Mark Barron right now. But Mark Barron is just, he's not big enough. He's not big enough against the run. So I feel like they need another Ryan Shazier type who's big like that, who's big and can do it all. I mean, Shazier had his problems. We went over how he missed tackles, and that's what was holding him back from being elite when he was playing. So he didn't go without his problems, but I feel like he was still, at the end of the day, a really good linebacker. The Steelers don't have someone like him anymore. So what do you think about the loss of L.J. Fort, and what do you think about the inside linebacker room as it is right now?
Well, the problem, as we know, is they don't have the personnel to do what is required in today's fast-paced, passing offensive NFL. You can't just be a guy that rolls downhill, thumps, rushes the passer, and stops the run like Vince Williams and John Bostic do. You need to be athletic, too. You need to be a fast guy like Ryan Shazier. You need to be able to do it all. And Shazier was that rare combination of player that could do it all. Losing him showed just how important that kind of player was, because although he can be replaced in parts like Williams and John Bostic can do, and L.J. Fort can do in certain aspects like Fort in coverage and Bostic against the run and Williams against in the pass rushing department, but you want a guy that can do it all. And the Steelers were unable to replicate that last year, and they haven't been able to find a replacement for him. So that has been the goal for the past 2 years from our point of view, and it looks like that is now their goal this year. So with that being said, I think it's pretty clear that this is the top priority, and based on the guys they were looking at, particularly Devin Bush, I think, is the top target. That's what it looked like to me, and I think a lot of Steelers fans are really thinking that Devin Bush is the guy. But the question is, will he be around? And we can get into that in a bit, but I think he is the guy. Last year it was Rashaan Evans, and the year before that, I think it was T.J. Watt. There might have been someone else that I'm forgetting, but I think it is Devin Bush is the target this year.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like all signs are pointing to them wanting him. It's either him or Vinovich. They sent the entire squad to Michigan's pro day, so it really wouldn't be I wouldn't be surprised if it was Bush, because it seems like Michigan is where they sent the most amount of people to.
Indeed. So now that we've got that out of the way, as I said before, we have 12 different guys to look at first. So, as we have been doing, Austin, why don't you name all 6 of your prospects for the audience and then go ahead and get started with your first one.
Sure. So I started with Mack Wilson out of Alabama. Then I got David Long out of West Virginia. Then I have Devon White out of LSU. And then after Devon White, I got T.J. Edwards out of Wisconsin. After T.J. Edwards out of Wisconsin, I have Jelani Thomas out of Hawaii. And then after that, I have Dakota Allen out of Texas Tech. So who are your guys quickly before I start?
I have Devin Bush. I'm going to talk about him last just because of the fact that Bush was the guy. I don't want to give it all away right up front. I have Tre Lamar from Clemson, Tavon Coney from Notre Dame, Burke Irvin from Washington, Ulysses Gilbert III from Akron, and Gary Johnson from Texas.
Okay. Well, I'll start with Mack Wilson then. So Wilson was easily one of the top recruits coming out of high school, with several SEC schools sending the 5-star recruit offers after being named an All-American as a junior and senior, and an All-State pick both seasons as well. He decided to stay close to home and enroll at Alabama, where he got to play in all 15 games as a true freshman on mostly special teams, but he also played some defense and also played as a H-back on offense. So he got 6 tackles through that playing time, but as a sophomore, he played in 12 games, starting 2 and missing 2 with a foot injury. In those games, he did play, though. He got 40 tackles, including 2.5 for a loss, 2 pass breakups, and led Alabama with 4 interceptions. Excuse me. This included 1 big performance against Georgia in the national championship game where he got 12 tackles. In 2018, he got to play and start all the games and got voted second team All-SEC for 71 tackles, 5 for a loss, 2 interceptions, and 5 pass breakups during the season. Feeling like he was proven enough, Wilson decided to forego his senior season and declare for the draft. So, hopping right into what's good about him, one of the first things I noticed and liked about Wilson is how much he was asked to cover running backs and tight ends, and actually succeeded. In the 3 games I watched, which were Auburn, Georgia, and Oklahoma, I didn't see him give up a pass on a running back wheel route once. So despite his lack of speed, he actually can cover really well. And that's not exactly an easy route to cover for a linebacker like him. It's a wheel route's going all the way down the field. So I like that about him. His coverage was good, and then also his wide receiver ball skills have led to some nice interceptions with some crazy contortions, which is why he had 6 in the last 2 years. Then he offers some feel as a blitzer. He can play through blockers with his eyes and plays with good hand usage and powerful bunches to play off blocks. So he will offer some ability as a pass rusher at the next level from up the middle. Then I like how he can unlock his hips and explode into blockers or pass them if he needs to, so that helps as well. When you combine that with his good pursuit acceleration, easy change of direction, and good anticipation of run lane choices, and quick response time to them, it makes him really good against the run. Last thing I got to say is Mack Wilson can definitely play special teams. I've seen him lay out guys a few times in his highlights from his special teams tape. So even if he's drafted to a team where he won't immediately be the starting middle linebacker, he offers special teams abilities right away. So going to the other side of things, my biggest problem with him is his consistency. I watched the Georgia game first, then Oklahoma, and then Auburn. And after the Georgia game, I felt good, but then watching it to Oklahoma, it was terrible. Mack Wilson had a really bad game, getting blocked out of plays by wide receivers and running backs alike. And I say blocked, but Menz literally got laid out by a wide receiver in one of those games. Then he missed a tackle that was really bad and should have been easy, and it turned into a big play. And just overall, his coverage in that game wasn't great. Obviously, everyone has their bad games, and for what it's worth, he did well against Georgia in a more important game. However, the drop in level of play to how bad he did in Oklahoma concerns me. Speaking of playing against Georgia, though, he wasn't perfect against them and had issues shedding blocks and leveraging the gaps in that game. Something else that concerns me is his production against the run game. He seems like he has all the tools to be a monster against the run, and in some regards he is good at stopping the run, but his tackle for a loss numbers are really lacking, with only 7 tackles for a loss in the past 2 seasons. That's not exactly ideal. There's some more issues with his run support as well. He's had shown to sidestep some blocks at the second level and allows the run lane to be widened to allow for it allows for longer runs. And he also has a similar issue at the line of scrimmage where he doesn't get into climbing blockers soon enough and allows a wider run lane to open up. So again, Mack Wilson is hit or miss, it feels, against the run. Really, his approach is just a little too mechanical at times. He needs to play with more instincts and feel, especially when pass rushing, but he really just needs to prove he can make plays. So a director of college scouting for an NFC team had this to say about Mack. He's big, can run, can cover. He's got the talent, but I thought he was hot or cold this year. He didn't improve on last year to me, and honestly, that kind of puts it perfectly. Like I said, he has the tools to succeed, but he can be inconsistent at times. The lack of production in terms of tackles or loss is concerning to me. I feel like there's a lot to work with here, as he fits the mold of an NFL linebacker, and with some consistency, he could have been a late round one kind of guy, and some people early on had him as a late first-rounder, but after watching his tape, he's definitely a day 2 guy, and I would actually probably go on to say he's a late round 2 guy, because there's going to be a lot of question marks when drafting him, so I say he's going to go in the mid to late second round. So that was Mack Wilson at Alabama. Let's hear about your first prospect.
I'm talking about Tavon Coney from Notre Dame, standing at 6'1" and 234 pounds. I watched his games against Stanford and Pittsburgh from this past season. Coney, a former top 15 linebacker recruit in high school, had a productive college career, started 9 of 12 games as a sophomore, in 2016, had 62 tackles and started 13 games in 2017 with 116 tackles, 13 tackles for a loss, and then was a third-team All-American this past season with 123 tackles. Coney didn't attend he did attend, but didn't participate. He didn't participate in the NFL Combine this year. Coney's a guy that was pretty interesting. He has a solid frame for an inside linebacker. He's athletically built. He's not a super athlete, but he can move. He has a knack for finding the running back on runs between the tackles inside, hence why he was a tackling machine when he played. He's got long arms, he has quick hands, and that helps him when fighting offensive linemen when he's engaged. He can go around or through blockers effectively, and he has great vision. I was noticing how he keeps his eyes on the running back throughout the play, and he diagnoses screen passes pretty quickly. Coney is a disciplined run fitter. He's rarely caught out of position and broken down into proper form as he prepares for a tackle. Speaking of a tackle, Coney was exceptional at tackling. In the 2 games I watched, he didn't miss a single tackle. And even though he doesn't necessarily charge into a hole the way I would like him to see him do that to take on offensive linemen, he can slip off blocks at the right time. So him not being as aggressive isn't quite as detrimental as someone who's just afraid of the contact. He'll take the contact and he'll try to find the ball carrier after that. Rarely did I see a running back run past him. In fact, I don't think I saw that at all. A running back would not run past him when he was engaged. He'd always find a way to get off the block and make the tackle. Unfortunately, though, Coney gets a little too aggressive or interested in trying to get around blockers instead of going through them. He'll overextend himself and he'll leave an open hole behind him. He doesn't respond quickly to misdirection plays, draws, and play-action fakes. He doesn't flow to the ball aggressively enough when the ball's not close to him. For instance, a receiver screen on the boundary, he's not going to get involved. He doesn't come in aggressively enough as a blitzer and got stood up twice by Bryce Love, who is not a big pass-blocking running back. And furthermore, I already said it, he's not aggressive enough. He's not coming downhill hard enough, and he'll get washed out of the play sometimes. Coney will gear down as he approaches the hole, and while I understand you need to be ready to make a tackle, and you don't want to blow through the hole because if you miss it, you're leaving a hole open, but there was just no explosion, no chance to make a play behind the line of scrimmage because of the plays he was making where he wasn't being aggressive enough. I really wanted him to be better in this aspect, and he's not quite the best athlete. His long speed is a bit of a question, which came up in questions of man coverage where he just wasn't that good at it. And also, Coney rarely blitzed. When he wasn't getting the running back or sitting back in the zone, rarely was he in man coverage or blitzing the quarterback. Bottom line with Tavon Coney, he looks and plays like an NFL inside linebacker. He's active, a willing run defender, and he has the stats to back it up. He can be a disruptive force in the middle, but the questions about his speed and coverage will probably keep him from being a full-time three-down linebacker in the pros. But he can add some strength. There's the potential to be a starter at some point down the line, at least a two-down guy. He's projected to be an early to mid day 3 pick. I wouldn't mind taking a look at him in round 5, assuming no one has been drafted at inside linebacker for the Steelers. I think he might be a better athlete than most think, but ultimately I think the Steelers should sit out on this guy this year, assuming there are other options that are better, which is what I believe to be the case. So that was Tavon Coney. Now let's hear about a guy that has been pretty popular in Pittsburgh and not really anywhere else, which means I think he could be a good find if Devin Bush is not available, and David Long from West Virginia, the other David Long.
Yes, this one's David Long Jr. So, and he comes from West Virginia, like you said. He's 5'11" and 227 pounds. Despite growing up in Ohio and having offers from Ohio State, West Virginia was able to get him to join their team. In his redshirt freshman year, he got to play a lot against Miami in the Russell Athletic Bowl, and he made 11 tackles in that game. In his sophomore season, he missed his first 4 games with a knee injury that he suffered in the preseason, but still went on to win the team's Defensive Player of the Year award, as well as being an honorable mention All-Big 12 pick at the will linebacker position for going nuts in the last 9 weeks and getting 76 tackles, 60.5 being for a loss, 4 sacks, and 4 pass breakups. Getting a full season was enough to get David Long to the next level of recognition in his junior year. He started 12 games and was the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, as well as second-team AP All-American for his 111 tackles, 19 for a loss, 8 sacks, 4 pass breakups, and 1 forced fumble. Long decided to forego his senior season and declare for the draft. So getting into what's good about him, he didn't run the 40-yard dash, so I don't know his actual speed, but man, he is all over the field, and it's definitely a sideline to sideline linebacker, and he plays like it. His tape was one of my favorite to watch because and I'm just talking about all prospects, and like not even just inside linebackers, because he was involved in like every single play and was always playing around the ball or working to it. What definitely helps him is he doesn't need to tap the brakes to change direction. He can really just do it, and that definitely helps his play speed. While a little small, being small has his perks for him, and he's still got a compact frame with good physique that gives him pretty solid base strength. But back to why being small is good for him, he actually has shown a unique talent to defeat washdown blocks with his bend and agility because he's smaller, and has shown the ability to squeeze through tiny gaps once he gets in there to make a play. What also helps him is how quick he recognizes play direction. I wouldn't be surprised if someone told me David Long Jr. isn't that fast, but he just does everything right to make his play speed fast because, man, he just does everything right when it comes to play speed. He is just so decisive and fast that as soon as he accelerates, which he has great acceleration, by the way, he becomes so disruptive in whatever he's doing. Like, here's a number I'll throw out there. 26% of his solo tackles were for a loss in the last 2 years. That's crazy. That's over a fourth of his tackles, just the ones that are by himself, went for a loss. So, dude is just so good in the backfield. Even when it comes to pass rushing, he had success hunting as a blitzer because he could track and swallow up quarterbacks once he's in the pocket. So, that really wraps up the positives. Let's go to the other side. And he has a problem that one of John's former prospects had. He's similar to Chase Winovich, from Michigan, because Long plays wild and undisciplined, where he will be playing aggressively and be more focused on destroying who's trying to block him rather than where the ball is. So he plays with a little bit too much aggression. Then, while his size has his perks in college, he lacks the size and length teams would want at the NFL level. And you could see size could cover him up if he wasn't hard at work hand fighting. Now, also with his aggression and fast play style, his guards do not really have time to make the proper reads on plays, and he has below average awareness of route development because he's just so quick to run, and he makes a decision and just goes with it. It's also contributed to a lot of missed tackles I saw on his tape, and also allows him to be exploited by play action RPOs because he bites on stuff so early. His pace really just derails the patience and balance needed to make tackles, so that's why you see him miss a lot. Then, last two things I would say about him is that his drops in coverage, his drops in coverages have inconsistent depth and have allowed windows to open up over him. And then his angles to the football haven't been that good, and this has also contributed to his missed tackle issue. So, when I was researching Long, I came along this quote from an NFC executive, and this really interested me. Personally, I would rather have David Long over Devin Bush, and this is a quote, for a round or two discount. They have about the same size, but Long is more productive and maybe less prone to injury. And I found this interesting for a few reasons. Firstly, we've been over this. Bush is a guy that Pittsburgh seems to be infatuated with and could very well be Pittsburgh's first-round pick if he falls to them. And then secondly, this is interesting to me, it means at least one team projects David Long as a late second-rounder or early third-rounder, where a lot of analysts have him going close to late round 3 to early round 4. The guy, this came from an NFC team too, so this isn't just the Steelers. This can't be the Steelers. So this is interesting to me because David Long might be hopping up secretly on draft boards, at least in the NFL world. Analysts still have him round 3 to round 4, but I think that's wrong. I'll go into where I personally think he goes in the second, but Long has been compared to Jatavis Brown, and it's scary how good of a comparison that is. Because they're the exact same height, exact same weight of coming out of college, and both are really good at changing direction with great play speed and direction. And their problem was missing tackles in college. Difference is Long is a little bit more slippery, and Jatavis was probably a little bit better in coverage coming out, but that's a solid comparison for me. So now, personally, I think over-aggression is one of the best negatives you could have. So I think Long is going to be going around 3 because he's very athletic, but a little undersized. But based on what the NFC scout said, I wouldn't be surprised to see him gone in the second round. I think a team might reach on him, but I think he's going to go early round 3. So that's what I'm going to stick with. So that was David Long, Jr. out of West Virginia. So let's hear about your next prospect.
I have Tre Lamar from Clemson, who's kind of the exact opposite of David Long. Lamar, at 6'3" and 253 pounds, is a 2-time national champion from Clemson. I watched his games against Notre Dame in the college football playoff semifinal this past season and their game against Pittsburgh. Lamar was a top linebacker recruit in 2015, was the Georgia Defensive Player of the Year his senior year, a special teams contributor, then started 10 games, started in 8 games as a sophomore, then was named a second-team All-ACC and Butkus Award finalist as a junior, and he declared he's a junior this year. I should have said. He started 14 games this year, made 85 tackles, had 3 sacks, 1 interception, and 5.5 tackles for a loss. So at 6'3" and 253 pounds, he is huge, and he looks massive on tape too. He's got muscle all over. And he's got pretty good technique at the start of the play. He's always in a ready position and uses his vision properly. He looks like a guy that's ready to make a tackle more so than Tavon Coney ever was. He stays square to the line of scrimmage most of the time when pursuing the ball carrier and is a steady and authoritative downhill defender when he gets started downhill. So when he is moving down, you got to watch out because get on the train because it's coming. Tre Lamar is a guy that will hit you, and he's got the size and the strength and the hits on tape to prove it. He does what Tavon Coney doesn't in the terms of coming downhill and the aggression. I like that. He's strong enough to match up with big and physical backs and tight ends without losing battles against them. And he's big enough, as a matter of fact, to warrant double teams by linemen and tight ends when he's lined up outside the line of scrimmage, or at the line of scrimmage, I should say. He had special teams ability in college as a freshman and had good tape as well. He's aggressive. He closes quickly on backs and receivers in front of him. Another high-effort player I like looking at. He gets better as the game goes on. That's something I wanted to make sure I had noted. He had a very high-quality sack against Pittsburgh in less than 2 seconds and had several tackles in that game against Pittsburgh in the open field on Darren Hall, who is not a scat back, granted, but he's still a hard guy to bring down. Tre Lamar, though, is not the most naturally gifted athlete that many teams covet in today's NFL. Tavon Coney is a far better athlete than Lamar is, and you couple the fact that he's not a great athlete, he also has tight hips and heavy feet. He's just not a guy that's going to cover a ton of ground and space if he has to change direction, and over-aggression can hurt his run defense. He will over-pursue his gap and run fit, leading to room for big runs, which is something that Tavon Coney was better with. So you're seeing two guys in Coney and Lamar that are kind of polar opposites. Lamar's changes of direction, I already mentioned, that was kind of an issue for him. They take a lot of effort and it really slows him down. And because of his poor athleticism for the position, Lamar is only going to have one chance to make a tackle on most plays. He's not going to be able to make up for any mistakes that he makes. He has to be right the first time. He doesn't blow through blocks enough for someone his size and with that amount of strength. And obviously the speed and athleticism issue I already covered. It goes without saying at this point, he's going to be a coverage liability, especially in man coverage. He also missed 2 sacks that I watched on tape, flying into the backfield with reckless abandon. For someone that's not that athletic, that's not really forgivable since he won't be able to catch up as often. He'll leave the quarterback ample time to sidestep him and elude him. He also has a problem with getting sealed off against athletic offensive linemen. I don't really know if this is something that can improve. So Tre Lamar looks like a pretty good 2-down linebacker on tape, but the important thing to remember is that he played behind the best defensive line in college football the last 2 years. The 4 starters on that defensive line could all be drafted this year, and the top 3 guys in Cleveland Farrell, Dexter Lawrence, and I'm forgetting the other guy's name. He is the other defensive tackle. They're all supposed to be drafted. Christian Wilkins, that's right. Yeah, thank you. They're all supposed to be drafted within the first 2 rounds, I believe.
Yeah, I think all of them are projected around there.
And then the 4th guy is supposed to be drafted as well. I'm blanking on his name, but he's another guy that's supposed to be drafted. So the point is, when you've got 4 NFL players in front of you, you better look good, and he did. But how is he gonna look when the NFL players in front of him are also playing NFL players? You know, the athletic limitations and the questions about what if he's not behind a good defensive line. You know, no one really knows how he's gonna play, so those concerns are understandable. Because of that, he projects as a mid to late day 3 pick, and he's not really going to be a problem solver in Pittsburgh. So this is a guy that just doesn't fit, and I'd stay away from him. So Tre Lamar, decent player. I liked his production, but too many question marks and doesn't fit a need. So I'd move on from him. So you already talked about David Long. Could you tell me a little bit about a guy who's been compared to him, but is likely to be a first-round pick? In fact, the first off-the-ball linebacker taken in Devon White.
Yes, sir. Devon White at LSU, and I know what everyone's thinking that's listening. He's not going to be there in the Steelers pick. He's going too early. Yeah, well, I want to look at him anyway, and there's always a chance the Steelers trade up or a player falls back. Perfect example, same position. Tremaine Edmonds was not supposed to fall out of the top 10 last year from the same position, and you know where he ended up? 16. So I don't want to hear it. Anyway, he's 6 foot, 237 pounds, and White came out of high school as both an amazing offensive piece and defensive piece at Northwestern in Louisiana, earning himself 4-star ratings coming out. He stayed home and went to LSU, and they decided he was best suited for defense. He played in all 12 games as a true freshman, getting 30 tackles, 3 for a loss, and a sack against Heisman winner Lamar Jackson. In 2017, Devon White made an absolutely crazy jump in production. He led the SEC in tackles with 133, led LSU in tackles for a loss with 14, and 4.5 of those were sacks in his 13 starts, earning himself team MVP as well as first-team All-Conference and second-team USA Today All-American honors. As a junior, He was a permanent team captain and went on to be a first-team All-Conference pick again, AP All-American, and won the Butkus Award for the top linebacker in the country after starting 12 of 13 games, only missing the first half of the game against Alabama, but still had 123 tackles, 12 of them being for a loss, 3 of those being sacks, 6 pass breakups, and 3 forced fumbles. White smartly decided to forego his senior season and declare for the NFL draft after being named the best linebacker in the nation. So, going into the positives, the story with White is he's an athletic freak. At a guy his size, he shouldn't be able to run that fast, and yet he was the fastest linebacker at the Combine, and since 2006, he's tied for the 3rd fastest time of all linebackers that participated in the Combine. So, yeah, I guess you could say he's fast. He doesn't lose speed when he changes direction either. He's got a quick sink and drive so he doesn't have to worry about it. Then his pursuit speed is ridiculous. He has caught wide receivers from behind with that speed because he's got such a quick twitch trigger with such great acceleration to close the gap. It also helps him as a blitzer. He can really shoot gaps with his speed and make some plays in the backfield. Thinking of his blitzing, he's got the desired agility to move from gap to track bouncing runners, and he plays with a loose upper body to be able to spin and contort around moving blocks. Now, where White really excels is forcing fumbles. When watching his highlights, he's got a knack for it, especially against running backs. He's just got such a good feel for where the ball is, and he can just tug it loose from weaker backs. I don't know if I mentioned that. I think I just said he was an offensive piece in high school, but he plays running back, so I think that's what helps him. I think he has an understanding of what running backs do, so he's gotten the knack for ripping it from them. But anyway, in terms of his coverage, he wasn't challenged much, but he plays with active hands that allows him to challenge throws in space. Then last a few things, and this is weird as I usually start with it, but he's a well-built with strong muscles on his limbs and his frame with the larger torso and shorter legs that allow him to have a better center of gravity than a lot of players. Finally, he's been described as a massive tape junkie, always fighting to get better and get the edge over his opponents. So now let's go into the negatives, and I'm about to lay some real heat down right here. I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all for any of you guys. For a guy that's supposed to be considered a top 10 pick, I really don't see it. I watched his games against Georgia, Alabama, and Auburn, and it was a horrific experience for me. Maybe I coincidentally just watched the 3 worst games of his career, but the tape from these games left me actually disgusted and wondering how Devon White could be even considered a top 20 pick. I swear, I don't know if any analysts have watched his tape and this just like snowballed and started from, oh, well, he's a Butkus Award winner. Let me just, he's got to be the top linebacker. Let me just make him number 1. And then all analysts like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I followed it. But his tape just doesn't line up. I came into this thinking I was looking at Devon White for the last because he was going to be absolutely nuts. I was going to be blown away with his outstanding play. But what I saw instead was a lot of problems. The far biggest problem for me is his tackling. It was horrendous. I saw him miss at least 3 tackles, and that's being conservative, in every single game I watched. So that's 9 tackles missed at least. And there's just a lot that plays into it. A lot of the times when he missed tackles, it was because his footwork and balance get a little too loose. And then other times it had to do with how many false steps he took in his initial movement that put him off. Sometimes when he was pushing to the sideline, he played without leverage and patience and just straight up missed. I have one right in my head from his game against Auburn, and it's still bothering me. It's just... And in general, he's just not a natural knee bender in space, and all this contributed to him missing tackles. So now my next biggest issue with White is his complete lack of play strength or physicality for a guy his size. White can't shed a block to save his life. I saw him get glued to a lineman and a guy run right behind him for a touchdown because he couldn't turn around and get off his block. It's not just against linemen though either. This is what really killed me. He struggled against running backs as well, letting them consistently finish under his pads. He just struggles to disengage from blockers, and it's pretty rough to watch knowing where people think he's going to get drafted. Then his instincts are absolutely terrible as well. I forget which game it was. I think it was Auburn, but they ran it 8 straight times in the same, 3 plays, and this man couldn't stop it at all. They just kept doing the same thing, and I guess you could do it to you could attribute that to the coaches, but I don't know. At some point, you got to be able to sniff that out. And if you're such a difference maker, if you're an NFL linebacker, you're considered a top 5 pick. You should be able to be stopping it regardless. Even if your scheme is bad. They just kept running right at him, and it was working. Then in the game against Alabama, they did a similar thing where they got White in a position twice on the same exact run play. Then he can also just be fooled by fakes and misdirection. That's really it. Last thing, and actually this was the least important to me out of all the negatives I looked at, but we don't really know how he is in coverage because he's mostly unchallenged. But I actually think that's the only thing he was good at, was his coverage. So that's what I leave it at. So bottom line is, never do I think I have more negative things to say about a potential top 10 pick in my life. But I have never been so disappointed in anyone's tape in our 3 years of doing this pre-draft analysis. I wanted to scream it from the rooftops that Devon White is not top 10 material at all, not even close. I feel bad. It's not his fault that he's gotten such a high valuation from analysts. So I guess I should focus on the analysts more that I feel like haven't watched his tape. I know he was the Butkus Award winner in 2018, but I truly don't think anybody looks past his stats. Yeah, he can play all over the field because he's an athletic freak, but all his actual football skills are trash. And I'm saying that, and I mean it. So as for draft position, I think Devon White is going to be the guy that drops this year that, quote, no one saw coming. I've seen him mocked as early as 5 to the Buccaneers, but I think he's going to fall in the first round. I don't even know when to predict the falling will stop because I'm going to be honest with you. If I wasn't told anything about White, if I was just told to just watch his tape and then judge where he was going to go, because I mean, this is impossible because I've seen so many mock drafts by now. But let's pretend I live in a little bubble, and this is all I'm asked to do. I would have projected White as a third rounder. He's not in my mind. He's not a first round material. He just doesn't. He doesn't play that well. So if you told me he was going to be a third rounder, I would have in no way roasted him the way I just have. But like at least now, I feel way more confident Bush will fall to the Steelers. So hopefully John likes him because I actually haven't even looked to see what John said about him. But I'm going to say White is still a first rounder because I feel like I don't think he's going to fall out of the first round. I feel like he's still an athletic freak, so teams are going to want to work with that. But I don't think he's worth it. And I'm going to say this straight up with a straight face. If Devin White falls to 20, I want the Steelers to pass. I'm saying that with a straight face. And this is going to be the hottest take ever because I know it's going to blow up. And Devin White's going to go on to be the best linebacker of all time. But right now, I say with a straight face, I would want the Steelers to pass on Devin White because he's going to bust really, really hard. So that was Devin White out of LSU. I bet none of y'all were expecting that. So let's hear about your next prospect.
Well, before I get into that, just remember that college football award winners don't necessarily translate into really good players. Tyler Medikevich won the Bronco Nagurski Trophy in 2015, which is given out to typically one of the best defensive players in college football, as is the Chuck Bednarik Award, and he also won that in 2015. So,
what about Gerard Holloman too? Gerard Holloman, the Steelers 7th round pick, a long time ago. He won what did he win? He won something. Like he was the best. I think he won the best safety in the entire college FBS, and then he went as a 7th round pick, and he disappeared. Yeah, he was the Jim Thorpe Award winner of 2014, and he was a 7th round pick when he got drafted, and he disappeared. So there's that as well.
Well, he's still kicking around on the Columbus Lions.
Oh yeah, he's doing real good.
Anyways, so all right. So Devin White. Now we're talking about Ulysses Gilbert III from Akron. Ulysses Gilbert III. That is quite a name. That's exquisite, and I'm a fan of it. I like it. But Gilbert is a senior at 6 foot and 224 pounds. I watched his games against Buffalo and South Carolina this year. A former Defensive Player of the Year in his county and a basketball star in high school. Gilbert III was a big special teams contributor in 2015 and was a 2-time first-team All-MAC selection with a defensive MVP for the Zips in 2017 and had 141 tackles that year. Gilbert III is a patient player in the run game. He can contort his body around bigger blockers. He's athletic. He closes quickly to the ball carrier. He has that sideline-to-sideline speed you're looking for. He can contain runners on the outside. He played in the slot at times. He targets the ball carrier well, even though he's not huge. He was a decent tackler. He could target where he wanted to hit the ball carrier well, not too high, not too low. He can finish in the open field. And he has the ability to track and stick to his man as a solid man cover guy. He drives his feet through contact. He exploited wide receiver screens a ton, especially when he was in the slot. He was versatile, and he offered pressure up the middle for someone that was small, and he actually scored 3 defensive touchdowns in college. So Gilbert III offers some interesting splash play ability, but he is small. He gets worked over by offensive linemen, not necessarily good ones either. He's not physical enough, and he shies away from contact, and that makes him a less willing run defender. Another guy like Tavon Coney, not downhill enough. He'll wait for the runner to come to him, which makes him a poor run stopper in short down and distance situations. 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, he is a liability. He doesn't take on blocks with a good pad level, which is concerning because he's short. So typically he'd have a better chance to have good leverage on a play, but he doesn't usually have that because he's standing upright. So he'll get blown off, and he just fully doesn't grasp his zone responsibilities in coverage. He had several blown coverages that led to big plays and touchdowns against his defense. He struggled with pattern matching, and this was evident on a long touchdown pass against South Carolina where his assignment that he blew led to a long touchdown. And he also got carried into the end zone by South Carolina's running back on a goal-to-go situation. So Gilbert III is kind of similar to L.J. Fort from what I remember, although a little smaller. Productive and athletic linebacker, instinctive with the tools to at least be a role player in the NFL, but he needs to clean up his play before he gets there. He needs to be a more consistent and reliable option in coverage, and his poor size and strength is going to keep him from being a 3-down linebacker, in my opinion. The potential's there, but he still has a ways to go. Gilbert looks like a day 3 pick to me. There is good upside, probably later day 3, but there's not a huge likelihood of him maxing out. If he's around in the 6th round, I wouldn't mind checking him out, but I think it's more likely he'd be a late 7th rounder or even an undrafted free agent. I think he could be a good L.J. Fort replacement at some point, but nothing more than a role player at best. That's how I see Ulysses Gilbert III. So with that in mind, talk to me about the Wisconsin linebacker, another Wisconsin linebacker named TJ.
So this one's TJ Edwards, and he is 6'1", 230 pounds. And I watch his games against Nebraska, Miami, Penn State, and then I also watch his highlights. So Edwards was actually brought on at Wisconsin as a quarterback coming out of high school, but they decided he was best fit for linebacker, so he switched position and redshirted his 2014 season. The next year, he found out linebacker was his true calling as he earned freshman All-American honors for his 84 tackles, 6.5 being for loss, and 4 pass breakups through 13 starts. In 2016, he upgraded from freshman All-American to honorable mention All-Big Ten pick for his 89 tackles, 8.5 being for loss, 3 sacks, 3 interceptions, and 2 pass breakups through 12 starts in 13 games. He was even named the MVP in their game against Western Michigan, where he went off with 10 tackles, an interception, and a forced fumble. In 2017, he was actually a finalist for the Buckets Award for the best linebacker in the nation, but still earned first-team AP All-American and was named to first-team All-Big Ten squad for his 81 tackles, 11 for a loss, 2 sacks, 4 interceptions, including a pick six, and 7 pass breakups through 14 starts. I personally think he should have went on to declare for last year's draft after that, but he stayed and still did solid, posting the highest tackle and tackle for loss total in his career with 113 total and 11.5 for a loss. He also had 3 interceptions, 3 sacks, and 2 pass breakups through his 13 starts. Following his senior season, he declared for the draft. So what I like about Edwards is he's the definition of consistency, having 4 years of really good production with 80-plus tackles in each year. He also got better each year, coming into 2018 with much better awareness and recognition than he had in years prior. And he also dropped 15 pounds to increase his speed, but he was still able to keep his play strength and play physical in the box. Then he is actually really good in his own coverage with high instincts while also being able to read the quarterback and understand what the receiver is running to play the catch point. He has 10 career interceptions to show for it, too, not to mention all the pass breakups he has, so he plays well at the catch point. Then what's probably best about him is his tackling. He is very disciplined and technically sound as a tackler, And in his game I watched against Penn State, he was essentially automatic. If he went for the tackle, he didn't miss. He didn't really miss many tackles from all the games I watched, really. Just the Nebraska game where he had a few, but that was really it. What helps is he has decent lateral ability to change direction and make the harder tackles in the open field. Then as a blitzer, he has good power in his lower half to squeeze while also being able to shoot an inside zone box to make runs wide out. And also, he can challenge blockers with heavy hands. But let's get into the negatives. I think Edwards could do with a little bit more strength in his upper body. His lower body is fine. He's got strong legs, but his bench press was very underwhelming for a linebacker, tying for the fourth worst with only 16 reps. So I think he could and should improve there to better handle NFL talent. It would really help his problem of him losing leverage as a run defender in space if he was just a little stronger. Not sure if it would solve it, but it would definitely help to be stronger. Then his speed is a pretty big issue as well. He definitely isn't a sideline-to-sideline linebacker with his not-so-great initial quickness. And he's shown to not be able to get to ball carriers heading to the edge without at least a head start. This also limits his man coverage abilities because he won't be able to keep up with the NFL speed, really. It doesn't help that if he doesn't understand what's happening immediately, he falls behind in the play. Last two things are that he's not a natural knee bender, and he also needs to learn when to shed his block a little earlier in space. So, Edwards seemed like a solid inside linebacker to me. Definitely screams solid backup. He wasn't flashy, but he wasn't bad. He was out there making tackles, and really, a linebackers coach from the NFC had the same to say, saying he's the kind of player that nobody in our scouting department gets excited about because he's not fast or splashy, but he knows how to play. We need depth, and we need guys who know how to play and are dependable and durable. So, yeah, he's the kind of guy I see lasting in the league as a reliable backup. This is coming from me. That could step in and play a few snaps here and then and give the starter a break. I don't think he will develop into a starter, but still, a guy like him who can be reliable is still desirable for the right price. I believe Edwards is going to end up being a late round 5 guy, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him go early on in the 6th either. So that was TJ Edwards out of Wisconsin. Let's hear about your next prospect.
I have Gary Johnson from Texas next. He's another undersized guy at 6 foot and 226 pounds, a senior. I watched his games against USC in 2018 and Georgia, their bowl game in 2019. Gary Johnson was a 3-sport athlete in college. Actually started at Dodge City Community College and was an all-region selection there as a sophomore, finishing with 8.5 sacks and 133 tackles. Moved on to USC and started at 7 of 13 games there in 2017, making 60 tackles, and then was second team All-Big 12 last year with 90 tackles, 16.5 tackles for a loss, and 6.5 sacks in 13 starts. Johnson, like Ulysses Gilbert and Tre Lamar, are high-energy and high-motor guys, especially Tre Lamar. Gary Johnson was the vocal leader of the Texas Longhorns defense last season and plays with that passion and aggressive style that you like to see out of your linebacker, and it's evident on every play. Johnson responds and reacts quickly to offensive line movement. He won't rush to the point of attack if there are bodies in the way. He'll wait for his opportunity to get to the ball carrier and has fantastic closing speed. He flipped a switch and it was like all of a sudden, boom, he was moving. He's got a downhill mindset. He'll shoot gaps. Gary Johnson is another guy that keeps himself square to the line of scrimmage and keeps his pad level low. He's got the acceleration to get through those gaps that he shoots, and he has a high tackle for loss statistic to show for that. And he was a full-time starter his last 2 seasons. He was still a core special teams player, too, so that was good to see. Johnson showed the ability to diagnose running back screens better than any running back or linebacker I looked at in this year's draft. He times his blitzes well, and he's fast enough to force quarterbacks to throw the ball away sooner than they want to when he's spying them on the boundary. So there's a lot to like with Gary Johnson's speed, but speed doesn't necessarily mean he's a great athlete. His movement in space is not as great as his 40 time might suggest with how fast he is. His sideline-to-sideline range is lacking because of shorter strides and shorter arms. His lateral movement lags behind his straight-line speed and will allow combo blocks to reach him because of change of direction opportunities. Johnson doesn't get off blocks very well, and he'll fly into a tackling situation with reckless abandon, often missing tackles because he is over-aggressive, like we've heard with several different linebackers in this year's draft, like Devon White. Johnson struggles with movement in open space, could keep him from being a coverage guy at the next level, which is something that his speed would really dictate since he's not that big of a guy. He needs to become more agile and at least just more reliable in zone coverage. He got absolutely destroyed by a running back on USC on a 3rd and 1 that ended up being converted, and you never like to see that with your man in the middle. Johnson was used as a pass rusher far too often for someone that really didn't contribute much as a pass rusher from what I saw. He needs to be like unblocked or practically untouched to cause pressure, and he can do it very well. But again, he gets in there so fast sometimes that he'll overshoot his gap and he'll get past the quarterback. So he's lacking strength to make an impact when he's engaged, and sometimes even when he's unblocked, he won't finish the job. So he's just inconsistent in that regard, and obviously he's lacking play strength too. I did like a lot of what I saw from Gary Johnson. He's fast, high energy, high motor, he's a leader on the team. He made a living on using his speed, but the struggles in short area movement, he needs to become stronger, and his long-term aspirations at the NFL are kind of a question mark right now. But still, though, Johnson can play between the tackles at least a little bit, and he's fast enough in a straight-line fashion to play at least special teams. Lance Zierlein from NFL.com thinks Johnson is a round 7 or potential UDFA target. Kind of surprised by this. I thought that Johnson would be like a round 5 guy. If he's still around in the 6th, if the Steelers haven't taken a linebacker, I'd be happy taking Gary Johnson. Even if not a defensive player, I think he could be a core special teamer, and I think that his speed is something that I would covet personally. So Gary Johnson, another linebacker that I liked out of Texas. Talk to me a little bit about, I'll just call him Mr. Hawaii.
All right. Well, Jelani Thomas out of Hawaii, he is 6'2" and 250 pounds. I watched his game against Wyoming, his highlights, and there's so much tape from the San Jose State game because it went to quadruple? I don't know. It went to 5 overtimes. It had 5 overtimes, so there's about 20 minutes worth of tape on Jelani Thomas from that one game alone. So I normally I watch 3 games, but because that one was so long, I left it at that. But a fun fact, I was curious because I couldn't remember a time the Steelers selected someone from Hawaii, and that's because I wasn't born when it happened. The last time the Steelers selected someone from the University of Hawaii was in 1994 when they selected defensive end Tosi Fomoe in the 4th round. The only other time they drafted someone from Hawaii was in 1977 when they selected offensive tackle Dan Audick in the 4th round. So that was just a fun fact because I got curious. Anyway, Tobias is the 3rd member of his family to go to play college football. Both his brothers played in college, with one playing as defensive lineman at Kansas and the other played as a linebacker at USC and went on to be a Tennessee Titan. His name was J.R. Tavai. It didn't ring a bell for me, but in case anyone wanted to know, that's who his brother that played for the Titans was. At Hawaii, Tavai got to start 11 of 13 games as a redshirt freshman, accumulating 56 tackles, 5 for loss, and 3 sacks. In his next year, he improved drastically and was named a first-team all-conference pick for 129 tackles, conference-leading 19.5 for a loss, and 7 sacks. In 2017, he downgraded to second-team all-conference pick, but was still ranked top 10 in the FBS in tackles with 124, while also having 11 for a loss and 5.5 sacks. In his final season, his production actually slipped a lot, and some of it was because he was suspended Game 1 for an arrest he got for an assault at a nightclub, but he also missed the last month of the season with a shoulder injury. So he only got to start 8 times. It was still named an honorable mention all-conference pick for his 82 tackles, 5.5 for a loss, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, and blocked kick. But after his senior season, he declared for the draft. What I like about him is that he seemed to have pretty solid play speed to either drop or rush on passing downs and could be useful in man coverage, especially against seam routes, which I find linebackers typically struggle with, especially against speed. He has solid acceleration as well. It doesn't take him that long to get to top speed, and that helps as well. But what his best attribute has to be his hand usage, for sure. He plays with pro-ready hands to punch and separate at the point of attack, and it works very effectively as a blitzer. Tight ends have really struggled to block him in college as well because that initial pop typically knocks them back with his aggressive play style. then he's always playing with his eyes beyond his blocker, and will do everything in his power to make it to the ball, to make the tackle. And he has become somewhat of an expert in navigating foot traffic to continue to the ball because of it. Last two things are that he's a former rugby player that that accurately tackles from the hip, and he makes well-timed adjustments in his pursuit angles. Now going to his negatives, well, I said his play speed looks pretty solid. Truth be told, his top speed doesn't look that high. I mean, don't get me wrong, he can hustle because of his acceleration, but he doesn't seem to have that high of a top speed. He may struggle in man coverage at the NFL level because of it. He may not be able to handle pure man coverage anyway. We don't really know either. Shoulder injury prevented him from participating in the Combine and the Senior Bowl game, and I was left with a lot of questions. Like, I don't know how strong he actually is. I saw him beat up on guys like San Jose State, but is he really strong, or has he been playing not-so-great competition? Hawaii didn't really play that many good teams, so I don't really know, and knowing his bench press could have been a little bit more telling for me. Then something I noticed is he could take too long to come off blocks. I saw a few guys run past him on the tape because he couldn't detach from his guy in time, and at the NFL level, it's just going to be harder with stronger competition. Then I noticed a pattern with him. If he stops moving his feet when going for the tackle, he tends to miss a lot more. The technique he uses is a little segmented, so we'll have to tighten that up as well. Last two things. Firstly, he has to be a little bit more disciplined to be able to snuff out backside cuts when they happen. And he seems to not be really explosive, more just active and frenetic. So the bottom line is it was too bad Tavai was injured, so he couldn't have participated in the Combine or the Senior Bowl. I think it would have really helped his stock. I mean, it could have hurt it too, but I mean, I don't really think it could have fallen much if he had a bad Combine. Maybe a bad Senior Bowl, but really, even if his bench press was disappointing, I think teams would be going in expecting him not to wow them in that regard because of his who he played. That being said, though, I feel like there are a lot of question marks about him going forward. Is he going to be able to handle stronger opponents? Is his speed adequate for man coverage? I think with the risk considered, Tavai will go late in the 5th round or early in the 6th. A lot of people have him more in the 4 to 5 range, but I don't really see it. But his size and how he plays is definitely enticing and worthy of a draft pick. He's not going to go undrafted. So that was Jelani Tavai out of Hawaii. So let's hear about your next prospect.
Next, I have Burke Irvin from Washington, another Washington prospect. Burke Irvin, another undersized guy at 6 foot and 230 pounds. I like looking at these guys because even though they are small, they're kind of fast, and Burke Irvin was no exception. He did run a 4.56, which isn't the fastest, but he was still relatively fast. I watched his games against Utah in the Pac-12 championship game and the Ohio State Bowl game this past season. A former All-Northern Carolina defensive player of the year in high school. Made 34 tackles as a freshman. That increased to 44 as a sophomore. Made his first career start in 2017, starting 8 of 13 games, had 84 tackles, and was a second-team All-Pac-12 selection. And this year was a first-team All-American. Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year with 176 total tackles to lead the nation, 94 of them being solo, which is insane. But tackles aren't everything. What does Burke Irvin do well? Well, one thing that he does do well is he plays every snap on the field like it's his last. 94 solo stops is almost unheard of in a college football season. He has fantastic instincts and a football IQ that always have him near the football. A quick and controlled movements will help him get past offensive linemen. He follows and mirrors the running back's movement with ease. He has decent range from sideline to sideline, and he willingly sticks his nose in the pile, evidenced by his tackles. And he's not just someone that makes a lot of tackles. He has good tackling technique. He tackles the football, and that's evidenced by the fact that he forced 6 fumbles in his last 2 seasons. Burke Irvin has great balance and tackling form, rarely getting knocked over or knocked off balance. He reads the quarterback's eyes in zone coverage effectively, and he's another high-effort guy and high-motor guy. He fills his gaps quickly. He's an underrated interior pass rusher and drives his feet through contact. But size concern, again, that's going to push his stock down. A lot of tackles don't necessarily mean that he's a good player. A low percentage of them were for a loss. His pursuit angles aren't great. Bigger runs were resulting in his poor angles. He has short arms, which make it difficult to make shoestring tackle opportunities. His slow punch and rip makes it hard for him to unstick from blockers. He flows too aggressively in the first direction of the play, leaving him very susceptible to give up big plays on misdirections like counters. He's not always a responsible run defender, giving up his run fit by trying to get around an offensive lineman, and he's too aggressive in closing space, trying to hit the receiver hard while leaving the possibility open to a bigger gain if Burke Irvin misses the tackle. His size was exposed on multiple passes by an NFL-level quarterback in Dwayne Haskins against Ohio State this year. Good positioning didn't matter when you had a good quarterback making good throws like he was making. A good defensive line in Washington might have made Burke Irvin's life easier in college like Tre Lamar, and his tape against Ohio State was pretty uninspiring to say the least. So Ben Burke Irvin, another active, high-energy inside linebacker, he made a living in college on making tackles and being around the football. His instincts and demeanor make him a coveted locker room guy, but his size concerns and the questions about his production translating to the NFL level, I find it hard to believe that Burke Irvin is going to be drafted earlier than the 5th round. I liked what I saw, but I just see a more athletic Tyler Matakevich out there. Great college production, but limited, and ultimately the big numbers are not going to translate, I think. I think Burke Irvin will be a 6th round pick, and I like him. He's a high-effort guy, but I don't think this is a guy the Steelers necessarily need. So Ben Burke Irvin from Washington, my 5th prospect. You've got one more, Austin. Dakota Allen, I believe is his name, right?
Yes, sir. Dakota Allen is out of Texas Tech. I watched his game against Ole Miss, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, and then I watched his highlights. He's 6'1" and 232 pounds. If his name sounds familiar and you're not a Texas Tech fan, I picked out Dakota Allen specifically, but I'll get into where you may know him from in a second. Allen came out of Humble, Texas as a 3-star recruit, and Texas Tech picked him up. As a redshirt freshman, he got to start 5 out of the 12 games, getting 87 tackles, 6 for a loss, and 2 interceptions. However, Allen got dismissed from Texas Tech before the 2016 season after being arrested for home burglary and stealing guns, but those charges ended up being dismissed. Now, if that sure doesn't ring a bell, this may help. He ended up in the JUCO school of East Mississippi Community College for 2016, which is featured on Netflix's Last Chance U. And while there, he earned all-region honors for his 117 tackles. That's where you probably know him from. He was a fan favorite on that show, and I watched it, and that's why I picked Dakota Allen. It worked out for him, and he was able to re-enroll at Texas Tech for 2017, and ended up leading the team in tackles with 102, 6 being for loss, intercepting 2 passes, and having 4 pass breakups. In his senior season, he was a first-team all-conference pick for 73 tackles, 6.5 for loss, and 2 pass breakups through 11 starts. Following his senior season, he declared for the draft. And going into his positive, watching this tape, I really have no concern about his speed. In fact, I just thought he had a bad combine, so I went to go check his pro day because his play speed is just so fast. You don't even notice that he didn't test the fastest at the combine. It helped that he's just so good at changing direction, and that was reflected at the combine where he had the second fastest 20-yard shuttle and second fastest 3-cone drill of all participating linebackers. He's also got a solid short area burst to get where he needs to go, and this never changes throughout the game. He's well-conditioned and is used to playing fast in an up-tempo conference. Then he plays with active feet, and when you combine that with how well he does dropping into space and mirroring the quarterback's eyes, he's pretty solid at closing distance and covering pretty well. Probably was the best thing about him, to be honest, his coverage. It was pretty clean for a guy that isn't very fast. I saw him keep up with some wide receivers. So, again, I wouldn't even consider his speed an issue. I'm sorry. Because he doesn't appear slow on the tape. Then he's got some soft hands, with 4 interceptions to show for it in his career. Lastly, some intangibles are that he was elected team captain his 2 years back at Texas Tech and has been described as coachable and having a team-first approach that he uses to lead by example. So, going into the negatives, kind of the opposite of his play speed, his play strength seems really bad. I was surprised by the tape as he actually had 23 reps on the bench press, which isn't terrible, but honestly, the problem probably isn't his upper body. It's really his lower body. For a guy his size, I think he looks a little thin, so I think you should add muscle mass to the lower portion of his body. And I think he has room to improve on his upper body as well. So if he can, he should do that too, because I think it can help him in a multitude of areas. For starters, with stronger legs, I think he could run faster, even with the more muscle mass. I think part of the problem why his 40 was so slow is because he doesn't have powerful legs. Then if he adds muscle up top, I think he would become a better tackler, as right now his tackling isn't that good. He tended to need help bringing down guys on the tape I watched. So, also, man's got really owned by bigger competition like linemen and tight ends. Even bigger running backs at times, he struggled against blocks from them all. So so some increased strength could help him there as well. Now, somewhat getting away from his strength, something I noticed is he overcommits sometimes and misses a lot and misses potential run fits. Really, I saw him get fooled a lot, and it really boils down to him not really having good instincts, as he also tends to run to a spot rather than getting a feel for where the ball carrier needs to go. And also, he bid on play fakes and other types of plays that got him out of position so many times. Last thing I will say is that at the end of the day, he really isn't a sideline-to-sideline linebacker, as his acceleration isn't good enough for that, only in short situations. So there's that. So Dakota Allen is an interesting prospect. I find it strange how he was the second best performer at the 20-yard shuttle and 3-cone drill while having the 5th worst 40 time. It was interesting to me. He also had a bad vertical and broad jump, but to be fair, his pro day had a much better vertical, so I guess that was just a bad one for him. Anyhow, he bounced back from adversity once, and now he's ready to face it again, and he's projected as an undrafted free agent, and I actually agree. I don't think Allen is worth a 7th-round pick, so I believe he will be a priority free agent for a team, as his size is pretty solid, and there's some things to like about him, but at the end of the day, he just has a lot of problems. Yeah. So that was Dakota Allen out of Texas Tech. Let's hear about your 5th and final prospect, possibly the most important name we'll have to talk about.
It's Devin Bush. It's this year's Rashaan Evans. Last year's, I guess it was TJ. Well, I think there was someone they wanted before that, but William Jackson III. This is the guy. Devin Bush is the target for the Pittsburgh Steelers, an athletic inside linebacker at 5'11", 234. A lot of you guys probably already know a lot about him, but he's fast. He's got the second best 40 time of inside linebackers from the combine, the best vertical. I watched 4 games this year. I watched the games against Rutgers and Nebraska, 2 schools that aren't great. I watched a good game against Michigan State, and I watched a game against Ohio State, the best team they played last year. So, if the name Devin Bush is familiar, that is because his father played for the Falcons, Rams, and Cleveland Browns as a safety back in the day, in the late 90s. Devin Bush was a former 4-star recruit and 2-time All-Florida pick in high school. Didn't become a contributor until really his sophomore season in 2017. He had 102 tackles, 9.5 of them went for a loss, 5 sacks, and had 1 interception, and was also a finalist for the Butkus Award. And then he was named a captain last year, made 80 tackles, 9.5 more tackles for a loss, with 5 sacks, 6 pass breakups, and he did all that in 12 games. He was named the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year this past year and was the AP second-team All-American. So Devin Bush has a filled-out, powerful frame, and despite being only 5'11", he looks massive in that body on tape. He's got really good vision. He trusts what he sees. He's rarely caught out of position due to his vision, and when he does, he has the makeup speed and quickness to get back in the play without missing a beat. Bush drives his feet through contact. He maintains body control through that contact, so he brings a lot of his tackles down. He has a good feel for the development of a run play. He has strong hand strikes to climbing blockers, driving them back or halting their progress. He can stand tall against down blocks because of his strong frame and his low center of gravity. He has powerful legs. He can dip and weave his way through traffic to find the ball. He's got great speed and agility to run with third down backs on their entire route tree, including wheel routes. He can make plays on the ball in coverage, too. He had 11 pass breakups his last 2 seasons. Bush is a sneaky blitzer, too. He has a way of being lost by the offensive line with the way he times it up. He's a gap shooter. He cuts through the edge quickly. He's a great pursuer of the ball. And he's got killer instincts against running back screens. I think I sent Austin several videos, including one where he just absolutely blew up a running back on a screen pass as soon as the ball got there, and he got there before the lineman even knew where he was. He's a hard hitter, and he was just a playmaker, man. I know that playmaker was kind of dimmed down by certain outlets in the past. But the fact of the matter is, a play isn't necessarily a pass breakup. A play isn't necessarily a tackle for a loss or a forced fumble. A play can be chasing down a guy who was wide open for a 2-yard gain on what normally would have been a 10 to 15-yard gain. Making a play could be noticing a play action fake before anyone else does. That wide open tight end that is running free over the middle that could be a touchdown. Maybe he gets there quick enough to make the quarterback second guess that throw. That's a play-making ability. I'm interested in someone that can do that in the middle because the Steelers don't have someone like that. And I think he had really fantastic tape against Michigan State, Nebraska, and Rutgers. So with the good, there is some bad, though. Obviously, the height concerns are legitimate. 5'11" is not what you're looking for from inside linebackers typically. His early reaction to plays were usually a step slow. I mentioned he was able to make it up without missing a beat because he was so fast, but he's probably not going to be able to get away with that in college. He's got to get a little better in this aspect, or he could find himself in some trouble. Misdirection plays were also problems for Bush at times. The Ohio State was a prime example. The slow diagnoses led to a big play here and there. But again, that could have just been Michigan's game plan against Ohio State too. They gave up 63 points, and I think a lot of that had to do with coaching as well. In any case, bigger offensive linemen can render him useless if they do get his hands on him, and they are strong guys because, again, he isn't that big or strong. He is strong, but not massively strong. And he needs to continue showing good tape as a downhill linebacker. He did do it in college, but can it continue against NFL linemen? He will take on blockers, but he'll take them on like straight up, and he needs to be a little more elusive without taking unnecessary punishment. He's not going to last long at the NFL level if he keeps doing that. He loses his technique at times when he's in pursuit. This led to missed tackles, especially against bigger backs like L.J. Scott. He'll come in too high or too low, and he won't make the right decision. Kind of unlike who was it? Ulysses Gilbert. Gilbert would come in the right way, and Devin Bush does not. He did struggle in space at times due to a lack of length, and has a bad tendency to start guessing rather than reading in certain situations. This needs to stop. Devin Bush was also too speedy for his own good sometimes. He'd run past the ball carrier when a breakdown in good form would result in a tackle for a loss or a sack, and his tape against Ohio State was not that good. Bush still, though, only had 3 to 5 really noticeable bad plays in that game. So, Devin Bush, the guy, if you will. He has the athleticism, he has the production. Many teams covet that in a 3-down linebacker, but the one red flag is a concern in the short height at just 5'11". Teams are not sure that he'll be able to stand out like he did in college, but Bush has done his best to make up for that by being a fantastic athlete with a strong body, and 10 years ago, he probably would have been an afterthought, but in today's NFL where you need to be able to be an athlete in the middle, a guy that can do it all, Bush did that in college, and I think he's definitely around one target. I think it's going to be tough for him to last till 20 with the Steelers. I think if the Steelers want him, they're going to need to trade up to get him. He is definitely legit from what I believe, though, Austin, and I would be very, very happy to see him come to Pittsburgh.
Well, I mean, fair enough. I feel like the undersized thing is always overplayed. I feel like being undersized is such a, I don't know. I feel like it never works out. Like, people are commenting on Kyler Murray, like, similarly, that he's undersized for a quarterback. And, like, people just come up with the stats that, like, the quarterbacks with the most, like, pass breakups at the line were all taller. So, like, I always think undersized is always overplayed for whatever position it is. If you got skills, you got skills. It's how it works.
Very, very true, and it's becoming less important as time goes on. I think maybe in the 1980s, that was a different thing, but now it's becoming easier as you're getting more diverse athletes like a Kyler Murray.
Yes, sir.
All right, so that being said, we've got our 12 guys, and you know the drill. Rank them for me one last time.
So, number 1, I got David Long. I just loved watching him play, and he played like White did at the price of a third-round pick. if Steelers aren't able to get an inside linebacker round 1, I wouldn't mind them reaching for long in round 2 because I feel like they would be desperate for one, and I feel like I wouldn't mind that. After him comes T.J. Edwards. I really just liked his play. It was technically sound, and I felt like he could be a nice rotational guy to have on the depth chart. Totally think he could beat out Matakevich for a spot as well. So I like him. After that comes Jelani Thomas. I'll put it this way. If he falls into the 6th, I'll like him better. But if he goes in the 4th, I won't be happy. As I feel like he wasn't good enough for that. Just a lot of question marks. But I'd be willing to take the risk for the right price. After that comes Dakota Allen. I wouldn't mind him for camp, but I think it would be a mistake to use a 7th-round pick. The 7th-round pick the Steelers have on him. Again, though, as an undrafted free agent, he would be cool to have around for camp. I wouldn't mind that. After Dakota Allen comes Mack Wilson, and he's just not the inside linebacker I think the Steelers should go for. His inconsistencies worry me, he really isn't fast enough for me to really want him. He's exactly the same mold as like Vince Williams, Sean Bostic, Tyler Matakevich, what they already have. So Mack Wilson does not make sense for me, but that still wasn't enough to make me make him last. Devon White was last. His tape was absolutely atrocious for a top 10 pick. I'd want the Steelers to skip him if he falls to 20, and that should be telling enough. So I really don't like Devon White, and he fell to last, and he's going to be a bust. I'm still calling it. So that's how I rank mine. How do you rank yours?
Well, top guy has to be Devin Bush. The size and length, I get it. They're concerns. But his playmaking ability and fantastic athleticism is too hard to pass up on for me. He is not Ryan Shazier. He would be Ryan Shazier light, if you will. That's a little accurate. But I would be elated if he was available at 20, and I would strongly consider trading up to get him. I liked him more than any linebacker I looked at the last 2 seasons. Slightly better than Rashaan Evans, who I also liked. The interest is clear. Go get him. Second, I have Gary Johnson. Mobility in space is an issue, but his overall speed is good, and he played really fast on tape. I think he could become a good situational player, and he won't garner much attention as a potential late-round pick, so I like that. Next, I have Ulysses Gilbert III. He could go undrafted. He's basically a better version of Gary Johnson, according to NFL analysts, though. But I like Johnson's tape better. Gilbert wouldn't be a bad ad at all, though. He's athletic, and he was productive in college, and he can play in the slot, too, which is interesting. Burke Irvin, I have 4th. The interest was there from the Steelers, and he has elite collegiate production. The size concerns, and especially his lack of upside, is concerning to me. He might only be a core special teamer, but it's hard for me to ignore the Steelers' interest with him. Tavon Coney is who I have next after that. I like him more than Burke Irvin, but I don't think the Steelers like him as much. He's a solid athlete and run defender, but he just doesn't have the top-end athleticism to be a full-time 3-down linebacker. He could be someday, but it's unlikely. I wouldn't bet on that. I wouldn't bet my money or your money on that either. And then last I have Tre Lamar. Look, 10, 15 years ago, he might have been a round 1 or 2 guy. But with the way the NFL game has evolved, players of his mold are becoming less and less common and important. He could be a good special teams player, but he's not going to improve the defense this year. So those were my 6 guys, and I think it's pretty simple. I think the Steelers are going to draft an inside linebacker, if not 2 this year, Austin. So I think the starters are set in stone right now, and Vince Williams and Mark Barron at the Buck and Max specifically, and then depending on who you get, John Bostic could be the backup to both, or the rookie will be the backup to one, Bostic will be the backup to the other, and then you'll have Matakevich as your special teamer.
Yeah, I think that's how it's going to go for me as well. I think John Bostic figures better as a backup rather than a starter because he's the same mold as Vince Williams. So I feel like Vince Williams is better. So I feel like Vince Williams is going to be the starter and John Bostic's going to back him up, while Mark Barron's going to be the starter next to Vince Williams. And the rookie is going to be brought in to back up Barron. I don't know if it's going to be Bush. I don't know. Maybe it's David Long Jr., but it's going to be someone that can get around the field. It's going to be a guy that's built like Mark Barron, that's kind of more athletic. And then Tyler Matakevich is going to make it for a special teams ability. I almost put a rookie there instead and said that they double dipped at inside linebacker because I think Matakevich is replaceable at this point. But I think the Steelers like the familiarity, so I kept Tyler Matakevich there.
I agree. I think I don't see Matakevich getting a second contract with Pittsburgh, and that being the case, this is his last season, so I think they play out the string with him and then bid him farewell at the end of the year. But that doesn't mean that he's not replaceable.
Oh, I agree.
All right. So, Austin, since I'll be recording a solo episode very shortly here talking about my full round one mock draft and my Steelers mock draft. So that being said, because it's a solo episode, you will not be able to be on because you have other engagements going on until the NFL draft. So you wanted to make sure you got your mock drafts in, and from what I understand, you have two versions. You mind expanding on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I made a first one that I worked really hard on, and then the second one I just kind of did it really fast. So the first one, I'll start with the one I worked really hard on, because I added a fun aspect to it. I added the last time the Steelers selected from the school the player came from. So with round one and pick 20, I have the Steelers selecting Devin Bush, the inside linebacker from Michigan that you just talked about. I feel like he's perfectly what the Steelers need. I think inside linebacker is the most pressing need. And after reviewing Devon White, I think he's going to be there. So I have them selecting Devin Bush for that. And the last time the Steelers selected a player from Michigan, it worked out pretty well. It was Lamar Woodley in the second round of the 2007 draft. But going to round two, I have one of my prospects. It's pick 52. I picked Juan Thornhill, the safety out of Virginia. I really liked how he's a ball hawk, and I think that's what the Steelers need. I feel like he's going to end up being the replacement to Sean Davis. I don't think he's going to really start this year, but the Steelers kind of showed that they like to have more safeties, and they don't really have enough on the roster right now. So I think safety is going to be addressed, and because it's a position that kind of like Sean Davis isn't. I don't even know where to rank Sean Davis. Sometimes I like to say he's okay. Sometimes I like to say he's below average. I feel like he's replaceable. So Juan Thornhill could actually end up somehow surpassing him maybe this year. But definitely going forward, I think that Juan Thornhill would be a good guy to replace Sean Davis because he's a ball hawk, and that's what the Steelers need. And the last time the Steelers selected a player from Virginia, it was very good as well. It was Heath Miller in the first round of the 2005 draft. So that was good. Going on to round three, pick 66 from Oakland, I have another one of my prospects. It's Trayvon Mullen, the quarterback from Clemson. I liked how athletic he was, and I felt like he's a very good developmental guy. I feel like he shouldn't have to start this year, and that's a good thing. I feel like I talked about him. I feel like if he got a redshirt season to refine his tackling ability, I think he could develop into one of the better quarterbacks from this draft. He's just a little raw right now, which is why he's going in the third round. But he's got the height. He can be a ball hawk, and I think that he would be a really good pick. So the last time the Steelers selected a player from Clemson, it was Martavis Bryant out of the fourth round of the 2014 draft, and I still say that worked out because they got a third-round pick from it, so I still think that was a good pick as well. After that, round three, pick 83. I have them picking David Sills, the wide receiver out of West Virginia. I felt like he checked all the boxes the Steelers wanted a wide receiver. I feel like the Steelers just need one more wide receiver, and he's going to fit the mold. And the last time the Steelers selected a player from West Virginia, it was Ryan Mundy in the round 6 of the 2008 draft. So going into round 4, I have Drew Sample, the tight end out of Washington. It's a little high for most people. I think he's going to go a little bit higher. That's what I think. And I felt like I watched his tape, and I felt like he was going to be a diamond in the rough. I felt like he's a gem, and I feel like the Steelers might take him because they do need a wide receiver too, and I think he could fit that. And the last time the Steelers selected a player from Washington, they had Travis Feeney, the outside linebacker, in round 6 of the 2016 draft. So actually pretty recently. So now, after that, in round 5, pick 141 from Oakland, I have Ben Banigou, the edge from TCU. I like that his developmental abilities. I liked what he can be molded into. I think that he's not going to be a starter. I think he'd be a special teams player, contributor, and he could also maybe rotate in a few times. I liked what I saw from him. And he came in to visit with the Steelers as well. So I like him going in round 5 to them. The last time the Steelers selected a player from TCU, it was a very long time ago. It was Charles Davis, the defensive tackle, in round 9 of the 1974 draft. Both the Houston Oilers and Phoenix Cardinals have more recently selected from TCU than the Steelers have. So that's something to consider. So the Steelers don't typically take TCU players, at least as of late. I still knocked Ben Banigou to them, though. So after that, round 6, pick 175, also from Oakland, I have Bryce Love, the running back, Stanford. And a lot lately, I see him falling down draft boards. His stock already wasn't that high, but there's injury concerns. There's a lot of concerns, and I have him falling down draft boards. I think he falls to round 6. And I think the Steelers are happy to take him here because he's a round 3 talent when he's not injured. So I think they're happy with this, and that's a great running back 3 to have. And last time the Steelers selected from Stanford, it was a really good pick. It was David DeCastro in the round 1 of the 2012 draft, so that worked out as well. Now we're going into round 6, pick 192, and now I'm starting to think of depth players. I'm thinking of where could the Steelers still improve here, or where does a guy have the best shot at making the roster? Who's going to be the best player available? I took another one of John's prospects called, his name is Michael Dogby, the defensive end from Temple. I feel like the Steelers have room to improve there. I think they could get better at the depth at the defensive end position after Stephon Tuitt and Cameron Hayward. So I like him out of Temple. And the last time the Steelers selected a player from Temple, he's still on the roster. It's Tyler Matakevich. He was round 7 of the 2016 draft. So after that, again, 3 of John's prospects in a row. Round 6, 207 from Arizona. I picked Ben Shaw, I think that's how you say it, the offensive guard from Wisconsin. I think that the Steelers are still going to draft an offensive a lineman in this draft. I think it's just kind of doing due diligence. I don't think he's going to make the roster, but I feel like he's going to be one of the practice squad guys that they cut one and he's in the roster to me. But he did stick around on the practice squad and maybe come back when the Steelers do have an open spot for him, and maybe by then he would have developed into a BJ Finney, like a guy that could be really helpful for them. So I think that they do pick a guard. I don't think he's going to make the roster again. But, yeah, and the last time the Steelers selected a player from Wisconsin, it's not very hard to look back. It's T.J. Watt from round 1 of the 2017 draft. Finally, the Steelers wrap up their draft in round 7 with pick 219 from Tampa Bay, and I have them selecting Justin Hollins, the edge from Oregon. I feel like the Steelers should double dip at this position at edge. I feel like he's a exact carbon copy of Bud Dupree. So, I feel like they can mold that into what Bud Dupree is. So they might like him. I think they brought him in for a visit as well. I'm actually not confident on that, but I think they did. And the last time the Steelers selected a player from Oregon was David Paulson, the tight end, in round 7 of the 2012 draft. So that was my long one that I worked really hard on and I really thought about. Now, just to list off my version 2, round 1, Devin Bush isn't there. There's no inside linebacker. You got to go Clelin Ferrell, edge from Clemson. Round 2, you're looking at who you got. All the good safeties are gone. So you're like, okay, now time to go cornerback. You go Julian Love from Notre Dame. So now the Steelers are still thinking about inside linebacker because they're like, oh no, we really need an inside linebacker still because we didn't get one last year and we can't do it all over again. So they get David Long Jr. out of West Virginia with their first third-round pick. Then round 3, again, same thing as my first mock draft, is David Sills, wide receiver from West Virginia. Checks all the boxes. Round 4, they go Foster Moreau, the tight end out of LSU. They seem to have a lot of interest in him, so I mocked them to them. I didn't personally like him, but I think it's a move the Steelers could do. Round 5, Byron Cowart, the defensive tackle from Maryland. He's a prospect that I looked at. He has high ceiling. I feel like he didn't get to show himself enough. So this is why I feel like it's a good pick for them to take and provides that defensive tackle depth. Again, round 6, Bryce Love, running back from Stanford. I told you why I feel like he's going to be there. Moving on. Round 6 again, Ugo Amadi, the safety/cornerback from Oregon. I feel like the Steelers have expressed a lot of interest in him for whatever reason, and they still need a safety, so they're going to go there. Round 6, Zach Bailey, the guard from South Carolina. Same idea as Bo Benshaw. He's going to get drafted, just kind of sit around on the practice squad, and then maybe develop. In round 7, I kept it the same. I have Justin Hollins, the edge from Oregon. So those are my 2 mock drafts.
All right. Now that we're kind of wrapping this up, who overall, who are your favorites and least favorites? It doesn't have to be a bunch of guys, just maybe 1 or 2 guys that you looked at throughout this whole process. Your guys that have really stuck out to you in a good and bad way.
So easily, I didn't even put him in any of my mocks. DeAndre Walker was my favorite. He's the edge from Georgia. Loved him. I think he's going to be a great edge player one day. And, I mean, if he comes to the Steelers, I'd be more than excited. Then Jordan Scarlett, the running back from Florida. He's going to be a late-round guy, and I feel like he's going to develop into a great running back. So I like those 2. And then, yeah, that's really all I got for that. As for hate, Devon White. Devon White, Kevin Givens from Penn State, the defensive tackle. I think that he's overvalued. I think that's really it. But Devon White is the worst prospect I've looked at in in the 3 years we've done this. I've never been so disappointed in a player. How about you?
I'll get to that in my next episode because I'm not entirely sure. But I gotta say I do love Devin Bush, and he is a guy that I'm very high on. I also liked Amani Hooker, the safety, too. I like Chauncey Gardner. There were a lot of guys I liked this year, too, as there are every year. What was one thing you learned from the process this year?
Don't listen to what analysts say. I've watched so much tape this year. I'll being honest, I've watched more tape than I've watched in previous years. And I've gotten a better feel for the guys. I've gotten a better understanding rather than relying on what other people have to say about the prospect. So a lot of what I say I say with a lot of confidence. This is why I talk about Devon White this way. I think if I did this the same way I did 2 years ago, I would have been gushing over Devon White. Never would have thought that he was going to be a bust. So I feel like this year more than any year, I've learned that a lot of analysts don't watch that much tape. To be fair, they don't have a lot of time. But yeah, what did you learn?
Well, I definitely agree with you. When in doubt, watch tape, and more is always better. And that's why I wanted to watch 4 games of Devin Bush this year. I wanted to make sure that I was getting a large sample size of what I needed to know for that guy who was important. Because again, like you said, when we started this, we would just look at what other people were saying, and we were just looking at highlights. It's important to see the good that goes with the bad, and it is time-consuming, I must say, but there are benefits to it as well. And yeah, I'd say this year it's just more than anything, just watch the tape. If the first year, I got to say, 2 years ago, it's never skip out on looking at specialists because of Colin Holba, right?
Yeah, because of Colin Holba. I forgot that's what sparks the whole memes and why we even look at specialists now.
And then last year was a good example of the guy you think the Steelers are going to get might not be there. I think that was a good example. I think last year was a good example of be prepared to look for a plan B, because I think when Evans was off the board and there weren't any linebackers available, I didn't know what to expect. And Edmonds was certainly a shock, but I didn't really know where the Steelers were going to go after that. And I'm sure you felt the same way.
Yeah, it was a little confusing. It was like, well, what do they do now? It just seemed like it was lost. It seemed better to just trade back at that point.
Indeed. So there's definitely a lot to learn every year, and I hope we continue to learn more as time goes on. I also really liked T.J. Hawkinson, and I also liked Chase Winovich. I liked Miles Boykin as well. And, of course, I always love my pit running backs. Even though you looked at Quadri Olson, I like him and Darren Hall. As far as guys I didn't like, I wasn't crazy about Will Grier, going way back now. I didn't like Marvell Tell much. I didn't like David Long a lot. I liked his cover ability, but not his aggressiveness. And who else did not? I didn't like Chris Slayton, the defensive tackle from Syracuse that's also going back. So, yeah, definitely a lot. We didn't look at as many prospects this year as we did last year, but I think one thing that we did instead of looking at a bunch of guys is we looked at more guys that we think, based on what we know that the Steelers are interested in. And I think that pays off.
Besides quarterback, but yeah.
Indeed, yeah. Quarterback was an understandable exception if I'm speaking for both of us there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess just any final thoughts before you kind of sign off before the NFL draft here, at least day one, because I know you'll be busy at least on the first night, and I don't remember about the second day.
Yeah, just 2 names that we didn't cover that people should look out for. Montez Sweat is moving down draft boards and could be this year's Maurice Hurst. Maurice Hurst was projected as a first-rounder all the way. Like, maybe some guys had him early, round 2, but he was gone really early, and he ended up round 5 to the Raiders. Montez Sweat, same problem. It's just he's got a heart condition, and teams worry about that. Teams are worried about that going forward, and he could be this year's Maurice Hurst. But he's athletically gifted and an athletic freak. I feel like he's not. He's more. I'll call it like the Bud Dupree type. I haven't watched any tape on him. I feel, so I can't say that for sure. But I feel like that is what he's like. But I mean, if he falls to round 3 because he has a heart condition, that might not even matter. Like Maurice Hurst, it just worked out for the Raiders. I feel like I'd be about it. Another name, Savage from Maryland. It would kind of be like Storybook that he replaced Sean Davis twice in his career. I can't say that for sure because this is another guy I haven't actually watched tape on. I'm fairly confident that when Sean Davis left Maryland, Savage became the starter. And there's been talks that Savage might be a surprise first rounder this year. So that's something to watch out for as well. So watch out for those two guys being associated with Pittsburgh as well, because there's plenty of reason to think so now. And that's really it. Oh, there's one more thing. I just wanted to say another player I liked, not going to ever go to the Steelers, but Kyler Murray I think is going to work out as a quarterback. I think he's going to be great and fantastic. And, and a guy you reminded me when you said a guy with the same last name. I like the Darius Slayton, the wide receiver out of Auburn. I think he's going to be a sleeper in this year's draft. And Alize Mack from Notre Dame, the tight end. I think also a sleeper agent. And one last thing I wanted to contribute, since I'm not going to be here. I don't have a full 32 pick round 1 mock draft, but my one prediction I'm going to put out there is that the Cardinals are not going to take Kyler Murray. They are going to do the right thing and take Nick Bosa. I think that covers everything I wanted to say about the draft.
All right, thank you for those parting thoughts on the draft, Austin. Always appreciate your thoughtful analysis and the attention you pay to the guys that obviously I'm not looking at. I always appreciate getting to talk with you about these guys year in and year out, and I just want to say I appreciate that, so thank you.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it as well.
Thank you. And one other name I wanted to add, we were talking a little bit about this today, was Rashawn Gary might also be sliding down boards with that labrum tear. So just a quick overview is that he's had this labrum tear and he played with it in college. I actually tore my labrum when I played football as well. Just a brief overview. The labrum, it's a piece of cartilage that's on the rim of your shoulder socket that keeps the ball and joint in place. This can tear. It can either tear partially or completely. So it is painful, I'll say. Like, it will restrict movement a little bit. The question, though, is how much pain does it cause? Because once it tears completely, you're not going to experience any more pain than what it already is. It's not like an ACL tear where if you tear the ACL, you can do significant damage to your knee. Once you tear that, it's as bad as it's going to be. It's not going to get worse. So the question for Rashawn Gary that teams need to know, which hopefully they've seen their physicals when he was at the NFL Combine. I'm assuming he was at the Combine. Is this labrum tear something that tore immediately or like not necessarily immediately, but is it fully torn? Is it something that's not going to get worse? Because apparently it's looking like his plan is to play this year. So he didn't get surgery this year, so he would get drafted, and then he would maybe go get the surgery after this year, maybe after he starts making some money, and then he'd go from there. But the surgery itself is like a 6+ month kind of thing if it's fully torn. So if it's only partially torn, there is a risk of it getting worse, and if it gets worse, he might not be able to play. But if it's already completely torn, it's probably not getting worse, so he'll likely be able to continue playing with it. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview, because what happened with me, I was playing a scrimmage, I was the center, and there was one play where it first started tearing, and I felt it tearing, but it didn't completely tear at that time. It tore throughout the course of that scrimmage. I didn't think much of it, but eventually it just, like, one time I knew it popped, and it was a little too much for me at the time. I thought about continuing to play, and I might have been able to if I really wanted to, but I was also going to be a junior in high school, and I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to keep going at that point with that for almost a full calendar year. But in any case, the point is that Gary could have this problem, and it could be worse, but if teams do their research and they find out that it's already fully torn, it shouldn't be bringing him down draft boards too much. If anything, he'll be driven down draft boards just because of the fact that he is a question mark as far as production. That's kind of what I see.
I think that's fair. Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, and I think that he's just going to fall on his own. Like you said, I think the lack of production is big. I feel like he's another guy like Montez Sweat that's just an athletic freak that doesn't have the production or as many football skills as like other players. He's just got a lot of physical gifts.
All right, so that being said, we're starting to run a little long here, so we'll try to wrap things up here in a couple minutes here. But first, there's a couple bits of NFL news to get to before we get to the end here, and that is the Frank Clark trade. You want to tell our listeners about that?
Sure. So Frank Clark, has been traded to the Kansas City Chiefs from Seattle. The full trade is Seattle gets Kansas City's 2019 first-round pick, so this year, number 29, KC's worst 2020 second-round pick since they have two next year, and KC's 2019 third-round pick. Meanwhile, Kansas City gets Frank Clark and Seattle's 2019 third-round pick. So essentially, Seattle gets a first and next year second, and Kansas City gets Frank Clark and gets to move up about 8 or 9 picks in the third round. I think Seattle picks 21, if I'm not mistaken. So it'd be 8 picks or 7 picks up. But regardless, Clark immediately got a deal after being traded with Kansas City, and it's a 5-year, $105.5 million contract with $63.5 million guaranteed. And to be honest with you, if I'm going to give my opinion on it, I don't understand what the Chiefs really did. Like, I was kind of confused, like, why they would do this. It didn't make sense to me. They didn't want to pay D Ford. They only got a 2020 second-round pick for D Ford. In my mind, it makes sense. Let's pay D Ford and not give up our 2019 first-round pick or 2020 second-round pick. Because essentially, they lost D Ford for a first-round pick and Frank Clark. Like, I don't know. I said that wrong, first of all, but regardless, it didn't make sense. And you look at D Ford's deal, D Ford, because of DeMarcus Lawrence and Frank Clark, looks super undervalued now. To me, they should have just paid D Ford. They would have, I don't know, it just seems stupid. Like, to get rid of your first-round pick and the second you got for trading D Ford, possibly. I mean, if Kansas City's pick is worse, it's not. But I don't know. I think Kansas City just messed up this whole situation. I think I would have liked it better if Kansas City and Seattle swapped second-round picks as well. If Kansas City got to move up in the second round where there's a lot of cornerback and safety talent, I think that would have helped them. There's a lot of talent in the second and third rounds, which they need, but they only got to move up in the third. And I don't know. It's 7 picks. I'm not in love with this for Kansas City. What do you think?
I'll play devil's advocate, and I'll say the two things that Seattle or Kansas City has going for it with Clark over D Ford is the fact that Clark is 3 years younger than D Ford, while D Ford is actually, I'd say it's a little more like just over 2 years, because Frank Clark will turn 26 in a couple days here, and D Ford is currently 28, so it's a 2-year difference. So D Ford is older, so there is that. But D Ford also has injury problems, and 2 years ago he only had 2 sacks. Frank Clark has had no less than 9 sacks the last 3 seasons. So I guess you could make the argument that Clark is a more consistent option, but I still don't know what the kind of jockeying around the changing on the roster. I don't think they changed all that much, and now they're paying a guy a lot more who has less career sacks, and a guy who's only 2 years younger, but they're paying him more, and they gave up a lot to get him.
I think I would have liked this better if Seattle just got the first-round pick. If it was just a first-round pick for Clark, I think I would have been like, yeah, that's okay. That's pretty good. But it's the idea that he got so much money out of this. I mean, Kansas City doesn't have a cap problem right now, because I was looking this up recently. Kansas City actually has a lot of money to work with. But first of all, I think they should have paid Chris Jones first, and then also I can't get behind how much they they gave up in this. Like, the first round, giving up the 2022nd is just so much. I think they should have been able to get a 2020, should have given up a 2023rd and then still got to move up in the third round in this year's draft. I don't know. I just think they gave up too much for what they had to pay for this.
All right. One last thing. The Steelers are hoping to have Ben Roethlisberger signed to a new contract before the NFL draft. Adam Schefter reported earlier tonight that they're working hard to complete the contract extension. Ben Roethlisberger is going to be heading into the final year of his contract. The Steelers want to retain him beyond that. So I guess, how much do you think it could be worth, and will they get it done?
I don't. It's got to be somewhere in like the $35 million area per year. I'm going to say it's a 2-year deal with average annual value of about $33 million. 2-year extension. I'm sorry. Yeah. So with about $33 million, I think he's not going to break the bank and try to be the highest paid quarterback. I think he's going to be close, though. I think he's going to get a nice big chunk because of Russell Wilson. So that's my guess. What do you think?
I was going to say, I agree with you. He'll be in that ballpark, but he won't break the bank. It'll be interesting to see, though. What will Antonio Brown say when he gets the contract?
Hopefully nothing, but I mean, because it's Antonio Brown, probably
you know he's going to say something.
Not readable.
You know he's going to say something.
Yeah, you're right.
Alrighty, well, I think that wraps this one up, Austin. We under 2 hours, so we did our job here. A lot to talk about, but we did it. And as always, want to thank you for your hard work in the pre-draft process. It's always a lot of fun, and it's hard to believe it's already over. Now it's just time to read and react with what the Steelers do, and hopefully it goes closer to the 2017 draft than it did the 2018 draft.
Yeah, man, it's going to be fun. Hopefully we're going to be talking about who the Steelers draft. There's going to be so much stress for me because I'm not going to be able to see the draft. I'm probably going to miss the Steelers pick. There's a chance I get out for it, but I'm probably going to have to be, I'm going to be hit with so much at one point. It's going to be crazy.
All right. Well, as always, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast, ladies and gentlemen. You already know, follow us on our various social media platforms. You can find that through our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. And feel free to email us with any user emails at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much, as always, Steeler Nation in Austin, and you all have a terrific night.
Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.